everybody. It's Dave here, Darren over there. We're your two old bloggers, been commenting publicly on your Minnesota Vikings for over 2 decades apiece. That's right. It's a long time we've had our eyeballs on this team. Why? Because we love it. That's right. And we're gluttons for punishment. Obviously, we have to be. Now, training camp is upon us, and we're talking Vikings football with you. That's right. And we have 3 themes, as usual. We'll start off with training camp teasers, which should be pretty good. Then we'll continue our long-term look at the roster. This time we're talking about the interior defensive linemen, or the defensive tackles, the big round bellies that I love so much on the defensive side. And then we're going to get down to This Week in Vikings Land. And it's basically one topic. It's the topic that dominated X and the socials all week. And of course, that is Jordan Addison and his wet recklessness. Now, with camp starting, and Justin Jefferson recently gave an interview discussing J.J. McCarthy. He said, I want him to be just as confident as I am in him to make all the plays out there. With JJ, as in Jets, actively fostering McCarthy's confidence, how can this young quarterback, as in JJ McCarthy, succeed? We'll talk about it next on Two Old Bloggers. Let's rock! Vikings First and SKOL presents This Week in Vikings Land with Darren and Dave, your two old bloggers. And I spoiled the teasers with the Justin Jefferson quote, but I think it's a good one. And obviously with camp firing up, J.J. McCarthy is going to be the top number 1 story of the camp. But we have a whole bunch more, do we not?
I think so, Dave.
You're going to
I've got
tease
a
them?
bunch more. You probably have a few yourself. Well, you're just talking about one.
All right, let's start off with theme 1. And we're going to training camp.
We are, because we've finally exited, or just about to exit, the dead zone for NFL news. That time between mandatory mini camp and training camp. The rookies report to training camp tomorrow, the vets on Monday, and then you get the public gets its first view of the Vikings on the 26th of July, which is a week from now. And that means that we're going to start to get daily, hourly tweets, stories about the Vikings and how players are looking. We'll start to get an idea of how this team is shaping up, start to get some answers to the many questions we have about the 2025 Vikings. And so I wanted to go over, looking at some of the things that at least I'll be really interested in and watching out for during training camp and preseason, until we get to the selection of the Vikings final 50 plus man roster. So going to get into those. And I think the first one for me is really defensive tackles. And the Vikings made, the Vikings, of course, spent heavily to bring in Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave in free agency to beef up the interior of the defensive line. And so I'm really going to be interested to see how having those two guys here, how Brian Flores is going to work the usage of the defensive line, because the past 2 years were a lot of defensive downs where the Vikings only had one defensive lineman, one defensive tackle on the field. Sometimes they didn't have any. But the thing about this year is that Brian Flores also has never had two defensive tackles like with the pedigree of Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave, two guys who are probably known more for rushing the passer than being run stuffers. And he's never had guys with pass rushing juice along the defensive line. He's had guys like Harrison Phillips, Jonathan Bullard, those kind of space eaters. So now he's got those two guys, and I'm really interested to see how he's going to work not only those guys in, but anybody else along the defensive line, and what kind of pass rush and what kind of magic is Brian Flores going to work with, particularly Allen and Hargrave and the defensive line. If we're going to see more two defensive linemen on the field, a lot more than we have, particularly Allen and Hargrave pushing the pocket on and staying on the field on passing downs, which we did not see in the previous two seasons under Flores. I think, of course, Dave, not a lot of the hitting will be kept to a minimum in training camp for a bit. You've got your joint practices with the Patriots, where things could get heated. We don't know how much these guys, particularly Allen and Hargrave, are going to play in preseason. I suspect you won't see them very much at all. And Flores might not want to reveal a whole lot in preseason or even training camp about what he's got cooked up with this defensive line, particularly Allen and Hargrave. So we might might take a long time. The clues might be hard to the breadcrumbs he's leaving might be very minimal, but that's something I'm going to be really focusing on. I'm going to be keenly watching the beat writers, what they're reporting back on the defensive line, and Allen and Hargrave in particular.
It should be very interesting with those two, especially. And you're right, there is not going to be as much hitting as I'd like. Now, they put on the pads on the 28th. If we can hear them pop for the first time, I can't wait.
Yes.
But it's going to be interesting how they work Allen and Hargrave, what the plan is. I discussed it with Tyler earlier this week on his show, and I suspect we're going to see a waves defense where they use a bunch of defensive tackles. But how are Allen and Hargrave going to figure it in? They're probably going to get the majority of snaps, and obviously on passing downs, I would think, but we'll find out. It's going to be interesting to see. And you're right. Let's look for those breadcrumbs.
As I say, they could be sparse, but I think we are going to, by the time things get rolled into late August, we are going to, have a little bit better idea of what the role is for those two guys in particular, and what the role of other guys might be, including Harrison Phillips. So that's one thing. Another thing, we mentioned it, I think, on a weekly basis on the show since the off season, but I'm going to be very keenly interested in watching the secondary. Now, Harrison Smith, of course, Josh Metellus, and Byron Murphy Jr., they're known quantities. We know what they can do when they're playing at their best. That's not what we can say about a lot of the other cornerback depth and safety depth that we have. Particularly, we're talking about Isaiah Rodgers. We're talking about Jeff Okudah. We're talking about Mekhi Blackmon, and we're talking about Theo Jackson, the safety. The other three, of course, are cornerbacks. And so I'm going to be, and the secondary is where the breadcrumbs, or the breadcrumbs and the amount of information and data you're getting about how they're performing is going to be a lot more evident than with the defensive line, because passes are going to be thrown and they're going to be covering wide receivers one-on-one, and you're going to be hearing a lot more about their successes and failures. I think those four guys that I mentioned, I think we have high hopes for a lot of them, particularly Theo Jackson and Isaiah Rodgers and Mekhi Blackmon. But I'm going to really be watching for those reports throughout training camp and preseason, where going to be seeing if they're getting toasted regularly by the wide receivers and tight ends that they're covering. And if they are, that is not going to be a good sign, and could lead to the Vikings signing a veteran cornerback for depth, or even more than depth, if things don't go as well with Blackmon, Rodgers, Okudah, and Theo Jackson in the safety room. So and as I say, really going to be watching out for that. It's very important to the Viking success. I think that those guys, show out and play as well as we hope that they do. But if they don't, might be a bit of panic time for Vikings fans, including myself. But I'm going to be keenly watching that. So that's a second thing. Third thing,
it's gonna be rough when you go against the best wide receiving unit in the
yes,
league.
that's true. Very true, Dave. There's going to be plenty of times where we're going to be hearing about Justin Jefferson catching a long, deep pass on Isaiah Rodgers or whoever he's going up against. Same thing
Or
with
Okudah
Addison.
especially. Yep.
Yeah, with Okudah especially. Same thing with Addison. Same thing with even with Jalen Naylor, who's always playing really well in training camp and and preseason as well. But you're right. But I think if we're hearing a fair bit of successes about those guys being sticky in coverage, annoying to play against, making plays on the balls, getting a few interceptions. I think considering the level of competition they'll be playing up against at wide receiver and tight end, we'll feel better about that if we hear, a heaping helping of them doing positive things as opposed to getting toasted all the time in coverage, which, like you said, Dave, it happens.
Yeah. You don't want to hear, Jalen Naylor blew Okudah by 6 yards,
Yes.
No, ran past him. No, you don't want to hear that. But if you hear Okudah stuck to his hip, but Jalen Naylor nailed the contested catch, okay, that's progress on Naylor.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yes. So beyond those two, third thing I'll be looking for is Jordan Mason. We know he was brought in here to take uh, more of the workload off of Aaron Jones' shoulders, so that Jones is fresher later in the season. And as he's in his 30 years old now, we don't want him to get dinged up, and we want Mason to be, a viable running back 1B to Aaron Jones 1A. Also, we're hoping that Mason provides a bigger dose of power and makes us a tougher team to stop on short yardage situations and grind out some of those tougher yards in the 10-yard zone and at the goal line. But so going to be keenly watching how the workload is divvied up. What we can hear about that from Mason, how much he's being used in the 7-on-7s and in 11-on-11 situations, and where he's being used in those situations. And I also going to be interested to see how he catches the ball, because the amount that of playing time he's going to get and snaps he's going to take away from Jones, I think is going to be partly dictated by how comfortable the Vikings are in having him catch the ball out of the backfield, which is something that I've read that that's not a strength of his. But if you're going to be playing at running back and in the KOC offense, you got to be able to catch the ball, I think. And if you're shaky on that, that's going to reduce the amount of snaps he's going to play in the season as time goes on. So Jordan Mason, a guy I'm really interested to see how he does and how the Vikings are using him and Aaron Jones. And I think it's a key thing for this offense in 2025, because I would really like to see Jones get worked, have a little bit less playing time than he had last year, because I think he could use the rest. A couple of more things I'll be really watching for. Fourth is offensive line cohesion and competency, not from the tackles, because we know Darisaw and O'Neill are very good, but from Ryan Kelly, Will Fries, and the rookie Donovan Jackson. The Vikings spent heavily bringing in Kelly to be the center, Fries to be the right guard, and they resisted the urge to trade down and acquire more draft capital to stay at 24 and pick Donovan Jackson. So they're expecting, and they brought those guys in and drafted Jackson so that JJ McCarthy will not get pressured as much up the middle as Sam Darnold did last year and Kirk Cousins did in previous years with the interior we had back then. And also, we taught the running game to open up some holes on those short yardage situations, be more powerful, move bodies, be able to impose our will on the running game more than we've been able to do in the past. So really going to be looking again. This is another one like defensive line, Dave, because of the hitting and the way that the big round bellies don't really get to go at it as much in training camp in particular. And I don't know how much Fries and Kelly in particular will be playing in the preseason. Again, those breadcrumbs might be few and far between. as to how they look. But we are going to get a sense with when they're working with the one-on-ones with the defensive tackles, how they're looking. We're going to get a sense of how the communication is and how the relationship is between JJ McCarthy and Ryan Kelly, which is going to be key in the snapping and the whole lining up protections and that sort of thing. So we are going to learn some things, and I'm going to be looking for positive signs, particularly from the rookie Donovan Jackson, because he's the biggest unknown of those three.
Oh, without a doubt. I can't wait. I can't wait to see it.
I know you can't. And fifth and final thing for me is no surprise, but of course, JJ McCarthy, like you said, is going to be the top story for the Vikings in training camp and preseason, how he's looking. Um, every handoff, every pass he makes, every overthrow, every turnover, every touchdown pass he throws, or pass that's completed into tight coverage, we're going to hear about it. And I don't think, and there's going to be bad days, bad plays. Uh, it happens to everybody. Sam Darnold and Kirk Cousins certainly had more than their fair share in previous training camps with the Vikings. It's going to happen to JJ McCarthy. I don't think we need to be too concerned about those bad days or bad plays. Again, they happen to everybody, but I think what we don't want to see is that there's just multiple bad days for JJ McCarthy where he looks overwhelmed, is throwing not accurate with the ball, slow in making decisions, turning the ball over. We don't want to see multiple days of that. And I don't think that we are going to see that because it didn't happen last year when JJ McCarthy was a rookie. He didn't have day after day after day of struggles. Actually, what we heard about was he had there was steady growth from him throughout training camp and preseason. And with the second year, I know he didn't play last year because of the meniscus, but with the year of work he's been doing off the field and now on the field, like the Instagram stuff with TJ Hawkinson that we've been seeing, I'm pretty confident that that he will take that step up and look even better in this training camp and preseason than he did last year. But still, we're going to be reading a lot about how he's doing and how he's looking. And I don't think we need to freak out when we see a few bad throws or hear about a few negative days. So those are my 5 big things, Dave. But if you think there's any I've missed, please chime in. And I'm sure you
Well,
do have some.
The Instagram things with TJ Hawkinson, Oliver, Addison, CJ Ham. Of course, Adam Thielen was the one doing most of the filming and doing most of this stuff, which I still think Adam Thielen would be a great get if we could get him for next to nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It would be, I think it'd be wonderful. But the one thing I wanted to emphasize, and I did at the very beginning with that Justin Jefferson quote, was these two building the relationship that's needed to go a long way. They're going to be, whether they become best friends or not, they're getting on the same wavelength. And that's what we want to see during camp, is him build the chemistry, just like we talk with the offensive line, but with his receivers, and make sure that's all nailed down. And once we do that, there's nothing holding us back because we have such good weapons. If he could get to where he knows exactly where they're at, if he's reading to the right, but he knows somebody's over here on the left, and he can turn without even looking and then gun the ball to him, hey, this thing's going to be great. And I think, as Norsvia says, JJ's going to shut up the doubters. And I surely hope so. Without a doubt, I think that's going to happen. And it's going to be great to watch.
Yes. Yep.
But that's my 2 cents.
Mm-hmm.
For what it's worth. All right. Now on to theme 2. We're going to go over the position review of the defensive linemen, the interior D-line guys, the big round bellies on the defense.
Yeah, this is the third segment of this idea that I had to look at what the long-term outlook of the various positional units on the Vikings. Every offseason, we look at those units, but look at them in the short term. Basically, in this offseason, who are the Vikings going to keep? Who are they going to get rid of? Who are they going to bring in potentially? Who are they going to draft at certain positions? This is looking more at how things look for the Vikings 3 to 4 years down the road. And we did the secondary first, and last week we did edge and off the ball linebackers. So going with the big round bellies, the defensive tackles, the defensive line today. And this is a unit day that were a bit concerning to me, I guess, in just that there we don't have a lot of established vets who are signed beyond 2026. Uh, and the younger guys that we have beyond the vets that we do have are the Vikings have a good chance of having team control, but they're very unproven, have played very little, and we don't know whether whether they're going to be on the team beyond this season in a lot of cases. So I think a fair bit of long term looking at the defensive line uncertainty, I think, would be the word to describe by it. Getting to those vets, though, and you've got the graphic up there. I've talked about earlier about Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave being brought in by the Vikings on big free agent contracts, and those are guys that Allen is set to be. He's under contract up until under contract until 2028. Hargrave could be a free agent in 2027. The thing about Hargrave is, though, you got the ages up there. He's 32 now. Um, he's got a 2-year deal. He's 32 now. Do we see him being here beyond 2026? He'd be 34 then, Dave. And I think it's quite doubtful that he will be a
That's
Viking.
about the top of being productive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it'd be very doubtful that he'd be here beyond 2026 and that the Vikings would bring him back in 2027 when he's 34 years old. Time will tell, how he plays will tell, but most NFL teams aren't too keen on bringing in a guy, uh, keeping veterans around who are 34 years old along the defensive line. Jonathan Allen is a bit younger, he's 30. His contract says that he could be here until 2028, but there were some concerns when the Vikings signed him. Some of the analytics have looked at saw state believe that his play has declined a little bit over the past couple of years compared to his better days. So um, again, will he be here beyond 2027? Well, that's going to depend on how well he plays. The thing about his salary and the way his contract is set up is that in 2027, the Vikings could save like almost, they'd only have if they cut him before June the 1st, they'd only get a dead cap hit of about 4 million and they could save 17.8 million, which would be quite a bit of savings. He'd be 32 then. You would expect that if his play is already declining a little, it's going to continue to decline. So would the Vikings be looking to keep him beyond 30 when he's 32 and into 2028? His contract and the way and his age suggests to me that, like Hargrave, he's a 2-year guy here for the Vikings. He's not the long-term answer on defensive tackle, and most guys who are 30 plus never are the long-term answers there. Harrison Phillips is a bit younger than these two. He just turned 29 in January. Much more affordable than those guys are even now. And he plays a bit of a different role because he's more of the run stuffer, uh, blocker, occupier kind of guy, not
He
a
sets
pass
up the
rusher. So,
linebackers a lot.
yes, it does a lot of the dirty work as well. Now he is set to be a free agent in 2027. He might have a better chance of sticking around at least in 2027, just because I expect that when he turns 31, then he'll be 31, then he'll still probably even be a little bit more affordable because of his age to keep on a 1-year extension at a pretty minimum cap hit and salary wise. But that's going to depend on how well he's playing the role that he's doing now, which again is occupying blockers, creating some penetration and being able to set up, like you say, the linebackers and other players to make the tackles while he's doing a lot of the dirty work. If he's slipping in that area, even if he's affordable, he might not be a Viking in 2027. And I think it's right now it's hard to tell, but it would be what the odds of that are. But no guarantee that Phillips will be around beyond a couple of seasons, I think. So those are your three vets. Long-term wise, I wouldn't say that they're guys that you can say are going to be long-term guys along the defensive line. A lot of uncertainty there. When we're talking about the younger guys, Dave, that includes Jalen Redmond. It includes, Ivan Drake Rodriguez, Taki Taimani, and the rookie Tyrion Ingram
Tyrion.
Dawkins. Is it? I thought it was. I heard he got pronounced
Uh,
differently.
I look at it as Tyrion, but okay.
Yeah. Anyway, there was an interview done by him, and and he was being pronounced Tyrion, and he agreed with that. But it doesn't matter.
Okay,
You know
maybe
who we're
Tyrion.
who we're talking about. Those guys are, again, these are the younger ones. These are the four that are most likely to make the roster this upcoming season amongst the large number of round bellies that the Vikings have on the 90-man roster right now. The Vikings have the ability to keep these guys around long term. The question is, are they going to play well enough to deserve to be around long term? And that's a very big open question right now for all of these guys. Jalen Redmond's the only one who's played any significant amount of snaps at all amongst the four. Uh, Ingram Dawkins hasn't been able to play, of course, because he's a rookie this year, but Redmond has played last year, but it all was last year, especially towards the second half of the season. Can Redmond replicate that and build on his strong play last year? Don't know. I'm pretty enthusiastic about Redmond.
Thank you,
I think that
Norse. Tyrion.
I think oh, okay. I think he's going to be he's going to build on that play, but no guarantees there. The good thing about him is that if he does prove that he is worthy of being brought back, he's an exclusive rights free agent after this season. And we talked about that last week, where basically the Vikings they can keep him if they want him.
Right.
Or he's got to sit out a year. If they don't offer him contract, it's different. But the Vikings could offer him a 1 year vet minimum, and he'd have to accept it or sit out for a season. So he's a guy that they could bring back for at least 1 year, and if they want to lock him up longer because they think he's got a future, they've got team control over him to do that. Drake Rodriguez, great story last year, ended up being a redshirt year for him. He's going to be fighting for a roster spot in this training camp. I do think he's going to win it, but no guarantee that he is here beyond even this season at this point in time. Considering the amount of defensive tackles the Vikings are going to keep, we figure they'll keep 5 at max, at least on the active roster, and then there'd be some practice squad guys. But if they do decide to keep him and think he's a long-term guy, he's under team control until 2028. So he is, I think, in that long-term by NFL standards, where Taimani, another guy who's going to be fighting for a roster spot. We don't have a real true nose tackle on this defensive tackle group. I think he's the guy that fits that traditional kind of fat Pat Williams, space eater, occupy 3 blockers and let other guys do their thing. He's a restricted free agent in 2027 if we want to keep him around. So again, that's a situation where the Vikings can match any offer that anybody gives him if he gets an offer. We've got control over him long term. Ingram Dawkins, very promising, very athletic, and somebody who is I think, a great project. I expect I'm pretty certain he will be on the 53-man roster when they break training camp during preseason because of his promise and his athletic ability. He's under team control until 2029. I just don't think that this year, anyway, you're going to see him play a big role on the defense. I could be wrong, but I think he's going to be a guy who's going to be developed along, and this year will be a developmental year for him where he doesn't play a lot of snaps. But
He
he's
could
going to
get
have
some
to.
rotational stuff, but not
He
much.
could. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be much, but he's going to be a guy that
Under a
we have
few
no
hundred,
guarantee.
maybe.
Yeah, I don't think that there's no guarantee that he is a guy who will be here in 2029 or be extended beyond 2029. So you look at those four younger guys, and Redmond's the oldest of those at 26 years old right now. Again, a lot of uncertainty there of whether the Vikings see them as part of the future, and they've got to prove that they're worthy of a roster spot beyond this season, and that they are going to be a key piece of the defensive line and the Vikings defense going forward. We just don't know. You, so again, the vets that we have aren't locked up for a long time. The young kids that we don't have a young, obvious stud like a Jalen Carter who's going to be here a decade and is going to be a monster. We've got a lot of young, unproven guys. We just don't know what we have in them. So the defensive line, long term, the defensive tackles doesn't look that robust right now as far as are any of these guys going to be Vikings, say in 2028? Really hard to say at this point. And for a few of them, I would say certainly probably not at all. The Vikings, though, might not have, things might have been a little bit different, Dave, along the defensive line, though, if the Vikings had attacked this position differently. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has drafted a defensive tackle in every draft, all four drafts that he has done. But where he has picked them has been in the 5th round 3 times and in the 7th round once. So those are dart throws, long shots. Sometimes they work out, most of the time they don't. And you look at in the 2022 draft, he picked the Gopher Asizi Otamaweo, and as the 5th rounder, well, he's not on the team anymore. He wasn't on the team last year. He wasn't on the team the year before. He's playing, I think he's in Jacksonville, or he was in Jacksonville for a time. He didn't pan out. In 2023, they picked Jaquelin Roy in the 5th round. He only lasted 1 season with us. He's elsewhere too. I think he's in New England now, or he was. Last year, they picked Drake Rodriguez. Again, we talked about him. He's going to be fighting for a roster spot. Is he on the team this year, beyond this year, or even this year? Hard to say. And then they picked Ingram Dawkins, and Drake Rodriguez was in the 7th round in the 2024 draft, and now Ingram Dawkins in the 5th round again. So at some point in time, the Vikings are going to have to look at. Let's look at it at this draft. The Vikings, this was a very strong defensive tackle draft, we were told. The Vikings chose not to select a defensive tackle with their first 2 picks. They picked Donovan Jackson and then Ty Felton with their 3rd round pick. They didn't go with a defensive tackle. Instead, they signed Allen and Hargrave, short-term guys. So at some point in time, the Vikings are going to have to look at picking a defensive tackle early in the draft, on day 1 or day 2, if they want to have a better chance of getting that young foundational stud piece, round belly, that you can put in your lineup for 6 to 8 to 10 years, and he's going to be dominant or close to dominant. And the Vikings might also have to look at, targeting a younger free agent who's got some upside that they can sign in free agency to marry and pair with that earlier draft pick. Until they do that, I think the defensive line is going to continue to be this type of unit where the long-term outlook is we're picking up veterans who are 1 or 2 year stopgaps, and then picking up these long shot guys to round out the depth of that unit. Not that the Vikings have still been successful the 3 years as a team taking this approach in a long defensive tackle, but again, if they want to get younger and have guys that are around a longer amount of time along the defensive line, they're going to have to invest in it earlier in the draft and go younger in free agency if there's somebody who's available that they like. I guess to be fair, Milton Williams, he was on their radar. He would have fit that, but the Patriots outspent everybody to get him.
It is what it is. Now, Elijah Williams is supposedly a hot topic, and he's going to be interesting to watch during camp because I know very little about him, but Tyler Fornes gets all chubby over him. So we'll find out. It's interesting.
Yes,
to find generally good defensive tackles, you got to take them like you took Kevin Williams, and you got to take them high, or get them like Pat Williams coming off that first contract and they have promise. So
Yes. And we did talk about Elijah Williams a few weeks ago on the show when the Vikings had signed him because you looked him up, and yeah, his particularly his pass rushing stats at Morgan State are very impressive for an interior guy. But he was playing at Morgan State too. You're not playing Alabama, you're not playing Georgia in those games. You're playing Kutztown State or whatever the hell it is. And Alex Williams, yes, I have heard he's 6'7". We'll see in training camp whether that's the only thing that's worth mentioning about him.
we're going to see. So,
Yeah.
and thank you, Norsevius, for reminding folks to hit the like button. And I want to thank everybody that's joined us so far today. You guys rock. And I saw Jonathan in here. First time in a while. I hope everything has been all right on your end. But I do want to thank everybody that's here. And we appreciate you watching. Now, what comes after theme 2, Darren?
Usually theme 3, Dave, if my
And
math is right.
Yeah, and it's going to this time too. This week in Vikings land.
Yes, normally we have 3 or 4 topics that we go through on This Week in Vikings Land, but Vikings news has been a little slow this week, which is usually a good thing, as we often say on this show, because that means nobody got in trouble or did anything stupid. But speaking of getting in trouble, this segment's all going to be about one topic, and it's Jordan Addison. And we finally got some resolution to his legal issues that stemmed out of his arrest last July just outside the Los Angeles airport, where he got charged with, driving under the influence. And what happened this week is that finally got resolved. He pleaded to a lesser charge to get that resolved, and so now he's, based on that, he's getting 12 months probation, fined $390, and has got to take 2 online courses. If he takes the 2 online courses, which I'm assuming are about alcohol usage and that sort of thing, and not driving while you're using alcohol, that probation will get reduced to 6 months. But so that is what's the end result of his legal part of this. But the fact that he admitted that there was alcohol usage here means that likely he's going to get suspended for 3 games by the NFL, because as Kevin Seifert put out, I forget what the quote was, but unless there's some sort of extenuating circumstances, if you had a legal issue and alcohol was part of it, you're subject to a suspension. We hope that suspension comes down. The NFL makes their decision quickly on that. They have said after this came out that they're monitoring the situation, and we hope that they make a call on this as soon as possible, so the
Hopefully within the
Vikings.
week. Yeah.
Yeah. So the Vikings can know what they're dealing with, and they can work on their preparation during training camp and preseason on how they're going to handle not having Jordan Addison for likely the first 3 games of the NFL regular season, although they can be suspended for postseason games as well. Um, and but we're bringing this up because looking at it now, we're pretty sure that Addison's going to face some sort of NFL suspension, assuming that he does get the 3 um, games. One thing to point out is that the Vikings dealt with this in a different way last year with Addison when he hurt his ankle in the second quarter against the Giants, missed the entire second half and the following 2 games. And Addison not only was Addison not available for most of the first 3 games last year, TJ Hawkinson wasn't either. That's 2 big major targets on offense that the Vikings did not have at their disposal for the first 3 games last year, yet they went 3-0 in those games. So all is not lost if Addison is suspended earlier in the season. And it's probably better if he were then, because we put the Bears on the road, the Falcons at home, and then the Bengals at home. And I think that's a little easier 3-game stretch to not have one of your main offensive weapons than at some other points later in the schedule. But losing Addison is going to be a loss. He's caught 133 passes the past 2 seasons. over 1,800 yards and 19 touchdowns in the 2 seasons that he's played. So, he's a significant weapon. But again, all is not lost if he's not in there. I'm looking at Addison. I want to just get into who I think this impacts on the Vikings if he's out for 3 games. Number one, of course, is going to be, I think, Jalen Nailor. That's the main guy. He's going to be, step up as the number 2 wide receiver if Addison is out. It's a contract year for Nailor. It's very important for his future, and the type of contract he's going to get is that he plays well this season. With Addison being potentially out for the first 3 games or 3 games at some point this season, Nailor is going to get that opportunity to show that he is worth either the Vikings bringing him back in 2025 or 2026 or getting a significant contract from somebody else. And Nailor's shown at times he can do it. Now, when Addison was out last year, he did not get a ton of targets as the number 2 guy. He was only targeted 9 times in those 2.5 games, but he did catch 7 passes for 3 touchdowns. And we saw in the Green Bay game, I think you got the picture there, where he had 5 catches for 80 some yards, a touchdown. He was a key part of the offense in that game. And he has shown at times that he can be a legit number 2 guy. He's going to get the opportunity if Addison's out to show how good he can be and how much of a factor he can be when he's featured more in an offense. So this could impact him, and it's important for him.
Which makes me think, if he shows out with Addison suspended, now, obviously it's not going to change anything after Addison comes back. Addison's still going to be the number 2. But will the Vikings decide to sign Nailor at a lesser price? And then when Addison plays through his 5th year option, let him go or trade him?
That is a very interesting, legitimate question, Dave. I think a lot of that's going to Nailor is going to have to,
He's going to
weigh
have to
that
prove
quite
that
heavily.
he can deserve the number 2 slot. Yeah.
And also Nailor has to decide in his own mind, is my opportunity in Minnesota, if I resign with them, greater than it is if I go somewhere else? Can I trust the Vikings that maybe they're going to not keep Addison around after year 5, and then I can be the number 2 guy? Or is that a little bit too much of a gamble for me, and I'm better to take potentially more money and more opportunities somewhere else, even if the
And go
team
to
I go to,
Cleveland or someplace like that.
or even if the team I go to is going to be crap and maybe I never get to play in the playoffs? That's a lot of things he's going to have to think about. But it is a good question, and hey, the Vikings in themselves probably are, they've got to be weighing those options too.
Mm-hmm.
Nailor's impacted by this. Another guy that's going to be is the rookie Ty Felton, picked late in the 3rd round with one of the comp pick we got from Kirk Cousins. He had a monster season with Maryland last year. We drafted him because he's really, really fast and also is really good with yards after the catch. That is a skill that's a bit lacking on the wide receiver room of the Vikings right now. So while we expected, Dave, I think, or at least I should say me, that this is going to be probably not a year where Felton's going to see a lot of offensive snaps. Going to be a bit of a development year for him. And when you had Addison on the team, when you have Addison, Nailor, and Jefferson hopefully healthy the whole year, it's going to be tough for him to earn playing time. But hey, Addison's out 3 games. If Felton can show in training camp that he's got more than we think, he learns the route trees, he learns the offense well, he gains the trust of JJ McCarthy in particular, he could earn that playing time, and if he produces, could carve out a bigger role for himself, especially in the 3 games that Addison we think will be gone. And so he's got an opportunity here, even though it's not the kind of opportunity Vikings fans want to see, right? But he's another guy. 3rd guy is Rondale Moore, free agent signee we brought in, the little tiny guy from who played for the Cardinals for a couple of years, and then also was signed with Atlanta. There's been a lot of talk because he hasn't been able to take part in OTAs and minicamp because he's still recovering from his knee, that it's there's been some question about whether he'll even make the roster. A healthy Rondale Moore would certainly make the Vikings roster, but um, with Addison out 3 games, the Vikings might not feel comfortable letting Rondale Moore go, even if he's still working his way back from the knee. So that could give Moore an opportunity while Addison is out to again gain the trust of the Vikings, show that he's got the explosiveness and speed back from post knee injury, and again show what he can do when he's given touches in the Vikings offense, which could help him earn that roster spot for the entire season. So this is a big opportunity for Rondale Moore, I think. And the final guy that I think it impacts is TJ Hawkinson, because we already expect with JJ McCarthy in his first year as a starter, he's going to be leaning heavily on more of an intermediate passing game at times than Sam Darnold did, which means he's going to be targeting TJ Hawkinson, who's really good in that intermediate zone. And again, if Addison's out for 3 games because of a suspension, well, who do you think JJ McCarthy's going to look at even more so than he already does, especially with teams looking to do the best they can to neutralize Justin Jefferson? Well, if you're looking at, I think you're going to see T.J. Hawkinson catching a lot of 7, 8, 9 yard passes past the line of scrimmage and in front of the linebackers or just over them, especially if Jordan Addison is not there to scare the shit out of teams by beating them over the top. So those are 4 guys that I feel are really going to be impacted by the Addison suspension if it happens, and impacted for them potentially in a good way. And hopefully the Vikings are able to make use of those talents to cover up for the fact that they won't have Addison potentially for 3 games.
Just as long as we have this guy, I'm going to be happy, because I think there's going to be magic made between him and, like you said, TJ Hawkinson, and of course JJ McCarthy.
One thing I do want to mention about, and you passed it on to me too, with some of the nuggets about Addison, is that we heard he's kept the Vikings in, abreast of how this has all been going, which of course you expect him to, but he'd also voluntarily been on his own volition, been going to sessions of MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, and he's kept his nose clean this offseason so far. So I think, there's a few people in here. One comment about him being a diva. I have no evidence of that for Jordan Addison. I think that there are signs that he's definitely learned from what's happened the past 2 off seasons with the arrest and then the speeding violation the year before that. So I think there are some indications that he's learned from this and he's not going to continue to make these bad decisions, and that will help. Let's hope so, and that will help him stay in the league longer, earn more money. It'll also help him potentially stay with the Vikings long term if that's something that both Addison and the Vikings want.
I agree, and Addison's already lost himself some future money with all of this. Just besides 3-game suspension at $88,000 per game, he's lost that.
Yeah,
but any future team's going to take into the whole fact I can't drive 55 and then the sleeping on the off ramp. That's going to bring his price down to wherever he ends up on his second contract. So he's got to keep his nose clean and produce to get that, to make up for that monies he's already lost.
Yeah.
So
it's he's got to show, he's got to earn the Vikings trust and also earn the rest of the league's trust after this, to show that if we sign you to whatever it is, that you are going to be on the field, and we're not going to lose you because of things you do off the field, decisions you make off the field that result in the NFL suspending you. It's bad enough that teams always got to worry about the health of players because of the physical nature of football, so they can't be worried about your availability because of things that are non-football related.
Right. Now you've got to run. Tell the people why.
Oh, just fast pitch territorial championships this weekend. So I'm on the road, as I've seen, not in my normal studio at home. So working under these conditions. I got a game here in about an hour, And so, yeah, I got to run, but I was happy to be able to get this show in and chat about the Vikings on the eve of training camp, when things are going to get a lot busier for you and First and SKOL, and for everybody who covers the Vikings and loves the Vikings, which
That's
we
right.
do.
And what do we say there, buddy?
We say SKOL Vikings, baby, and thank you for watching.
SKOL Vikings.
Like, subscribe, and ring the bell, and rate us on your favorite podcast aggregator. Darren and Dave, thank you for watching this episode of Two Old Bloggers. We look forward to seeing you on every show on the new Vikings First and SKOL. You can find our podcasts as part of the Fans First Sports Network. Sports takes for the fan, from the fan. SKOL, everybody!